Route 66, Arizona, May 1969. Elvis Presley stopped at a roadside diner at 11 p.m. during a cross-country drive. In the corner booth sat an elderly man in a faded military jacket, eating the cheapest thing on the menu. Elvis watched him for 30 seconds, then did something that would become one of the most repeated stories about his character. What Elvis left on that table changed not just one veteran's life, but created a tradition that continues 50 years later. The drive across America, Elvis needed to clear his head. It was May 1969, and his life felt like it was moving too fast in too many directions. Movie contracts, recording sessions, Vegas shows being planned, managers and lawyers and people constantly needing decisions. So Elvis did something he rarely got to do anymore. He got in his car and drove. No security detail, no entourage, just him, a Cadillac, and the open road from Los Angeles back to Memphis. He'd been driving for hours when he saw the diner, one of those classic roadside spots on Route 66, the kind that had been there for decades, serving truckers and travelers. The neon sign said, "Betty's Diner, open 24 hours. Elvis pulled into the parking lot. It was late, almost 11 p.m., and the place was nearly empty. Perfect. He could eat in peace, maybe talk to some regular people for a change, feel normal for an hour. He put on his sunglasses and a baseball cap, his usual attempt at anonymity, and walked into the diner. The smell of coffee and bacon hit him immediately. It reminded him of his childhood, of diners in Tupelo where his mother would take him when they had a few extra dollars. A waitress in her 50s looked up from wiping down the counter. "Sit anywhere you like, hon." Elvis chose a booth near the back, away from the windows. He picked up the plastic menu and started reading. Burgers, fries, meatloaf, pie. Simple food, honest food. That's when he noticed the man in the corner booth, the veteran. The man was in his late 60s, maybe early 70s. He wore a worn military jacket, Army, from the patches Elvis could see. The jacket had seen better days, faded and frayed at the edges. The man sat alone, hunched over a bowl of soup, the cheapest item on the menu at 75 cents. He ate slowly, carefully, making it last. Next to his bowl was a small notebook where he was writing something with a pencil stub. Elvis watched him for a moment. Something about the man's posture, the way he ate with such focus, the careful way he made that cheap bowl of soup last, it all spoke of someone who didn't have much. The waitress came to Elvis's booth. "What can I get you, hun?" "Burger and fries, please. And coffee." "You got it." As the waitress walked away, Elvis nodded toward the veteran. "That man over there, how long has he been here?" The waitress glanced over. "Oh, that's Frank. He comes in maybe once a week, always orders the soup, sits there for an hour or two, writing in that notebook of his. Nice man. Quiet. Always thanks me, always leaves whatever coins he has as a tip, even though he clearly doesn't have much to spare." "What's he writing?" "I asked him once. He said he's writing letters to his grandson. The boy's overseas, Army, stationed in Vietnam. Frank writes him letters every week, tells him about what's happening back home, gives him advice, tries to keep his spirits up." Elvis felt something tighten in his chest. His grandson is in Vietnam right now? "Yeah, has been for 8 months. Frank's wife died 2 years ago. The grandson is all he has left. He worries about him constantly." The waitress moved on to check on another table. Elvis sat there, staring at his menu but not really seeing it. He was thinking about Frank, about a man who had so little that he could only afford soup once a week, but who spent that precious time writing letters to his grandson in a war zone. Elvis had met veterans before. He'd been in the Army himself, stationed in Germany from 1958 to 1960. He knew what it meant to serve. He knew what it meant to be away from home, scared, wondering if you'd make it back. And he knew what it meant to have someone back home who cared, who wrote letters, who reminded you that you mattered, that someone was waiting for you, that you had a reason to survive. Elvis made a decision, the plan. Elvis waited until Frank had finished his soup and was gathering his things to leave. The old veteran put on his cap, tucked his notebook carefully into his jacket pocket, and stood up slowly, his movements stiff, like someone whose body had been through a lot and wasn't moving easily anymore. Frank walked to the counter to pay his bill. Elvis watched him count out exact change from a small coin purse, 75 cents for the soup, plus a few extra pennies as a tip for the waitress. "Thank you, Betty," Frank said to the waitress. "Soup was perfect as always." "Any time, Frank. You take care, and you tell that grandson of yours we're all praying for him." "I will, thank you." Frank walked out of the diner, moving slowly toward an old pickup truck in the parking lot. The moment Frank was gone, Elvis stood up and walked quickly to the counter where Betty was ringing up Frank's bill. "Betty, I need you to do something for me." "Sure, hon. What do you need?" Elvis pulled out his wallet. "That man who just left, Frank, I want to pay his bill, but I also want to leave him something extra. That's real nice of you, but he already paid. I know. I want you to keep what he paid and put it in an envelope with this. Elvis pulled out several $100 bills, about $500 total, which in 1969 was a significant amount of money. I want you to put this in an envelope, write his name on it, and when he comes in next week, tell him someone wanted to thank him for his service and for being a good grandfather to a boy in Vietnam. Betty stared at the money, then at Elvis. I can't. This is too much. Who should I say it's from? Don't say it's from anyone. Just say it's from someone who appreciates veterans, someone who knows what it means to serve and to sacrifice. Betty looked closely at Elvis for the first time, really looked at him. Her eyes widened. Wait a minute, are you... Please don't make a fuss, Elvis said quietly. I just want to help. Can you do this for me? Betty nodded slowly. Yes, I can do that. Good. And one more thing. Elvis pulled out a piece of paper and wrote something on it. Can you give him this note too, along with the money? Betty took the note and read it, her eyes filled with tears. Oh, honey, this is beautiful. Yes, I'll give it to him. Thank you. Elvis returned to his booth. His burger and fries had arrived, but he'd lost his appetite. He just sat there for a few minutes, thinking about Frank, about his grandson in Vietnam, about all the veterans who'd served and sacrificed and come home to struggle in silence. Finally, Elvis stood up, left money for his own meal plus a generous tip, and walked out to his car. He got in, sat behind the wheel for a moment, and said a prayer, something he did often but rarely talked about. God, keep Frank's grandson safe, bring him home, and help Frank know that his service matters, that his sacrifice matters, that he's not forgotten. Then Elvis started the car and continued his drive to Memphis, but the story was far from over. The following week, Frank came back to Betty's diner exactly 1 week later, like clockwork. Same booth, same time, same order, 1 bowl of soup, 75 cents. Betty brought the soup to his table along with a white envelope. Frank, someone left this for you last week. Frank looked at the envelope, confused. For me? Who? I don't know his name. He was just a customer. He saw you here last week and wanted to do something kind. He said to tell you it's from someone who appreciates veterans and grandfathers. Frank opened the envelope carefully. Inside were 5 $100 bills and a handwritten note. Frank's hand started shaking as he read the note. Dear Frank, I saw you in the diner last week writing letters to your grandson who's serving in Vietnam. I want you to know that what you're doing matters. Those letters matter. They're keeping your grandson going, reminding him he has someone to come home to. I served in the army too. I know what it's like to be far from home, scared, wondering if you'll make it back. The letters from home were everything. They were the difference between giving up and holding on. You're doing important work, even if it doesn't feel like it. You're being a good grandfather. You're honoring your service by supporting the next generation of servicemen. This money is a thank you. For your service, for your sacrifice, for being the kind of man who writes letters every week, even when you can barely afford soup. Use this money however you need it. Buy groceries, pay bills, or maybe send a care package to your grandson, something from home to remind him you're thinking of him. You matter, Frank. Your service mattered. Your grandson is lucky to have you. With respect and gratitude, a fellow veteran who wanted to help. Frank sat in that booth and cried. Not quiet tears. Full, body-shaking sobs. Betty came over and sat with him, holding his hand while he cried. I don't understand, Frank finally managed to say. Who was this person? Why would someone do this for me? I don't know who he was, Betty said. And she didn't. Elvis had been in sunglasses and a baseball cap, and she hadn't recognized him in the moment. But he saw you. He saw what you were doing, and he wanted to help. That's all that matters. Frank carefully folded the money and the note and put them back in the envelope. I'm going to use this to send my grandson a care package, the best care package he's ever gotten, and I'm going to save some to take him out for a real dinner when he gets home, if he gets home. Frank's voice broke on those last words. He'll get home, Betty said firmly. You keep writing those letters. You keep being his reason to survive. He'll come home. Frank nodded. I'll keep writing. I'll write him every single day if I have to. The truth comes out. Betty didn't know the man who'd left the money was Elvis. But 2 weeks later, a trucker who'd been in the diner that night came back and said to Betty, You know that guy who paid for the old veteran's meal? That was Elvis Presley. Betty's mouth fell open. What? Yeah, I recognized him when he stood up. I didn't say anything because he clearly didn't want attention, but that was definitely Elvis. I'd know that face anywhere, sunglasses or not. Betty sat down heavily. Elvis Presley left $500 for Frank? Apparently. Did Frank get it? Yeah, he came in last week and I gave it to him. He cried, said he was going to use it to send his grandson a care package. That sounds about right, the trucker said. Elvis does stuff like this all the time. Helps veterans, helps people in need. Usually doesn't want credit for it. Betty thought about this for days. Elvis Presley had been in her diner, had seen Frank, had quietly helped in the most generous way possible, and hadn't wanted anyone to know. She decided not to tell Frank it was Elvis. The note had said, a fellow veteran who wanted to help. And that was true. Elvis had served. He was a fellow veteran. That's all Frank needed to know. But Betty told a few regulars. The story spread through the community, and slowly, other customers started doing the same thing, leaving money in envelopes for veterans who came into the diner, writing notes of appreciation, quietly paying for meals. It became a tradition, the Elvis tradition, though nobody called it that out loud. Just veterans helping veterans, people helping people. The grandson comes home. 8 months later, Frank's grandson Michael came home from Vietnam. He'd survived his tour, made it back in one piece, physically at least. Mentally and emotionally, he was struggling, like most veterans did. But one of the things that helped Michael through those hard months was the letters from his grandfather. Every week, without fail, a letter would arrive. Sometimes two. Frank writing about the weather, about the neighbors, about the diner where he had soup every week, about how proud he was of Michael. And in October 1969, Michael received a care package unlike anything he'd gotten before. It was full of home-cooked food that Frank had paid Betty to make, magazines, a warm blanket, new socks, and a long letter explaining about the stranger who'd left money so Frank could send this package. Someone saw me writing to you, Frank had written. Someone who understood what those letters meant. He left money so I could send you this package and remind you that you're not alone over there, that people back home care, that I care. Come home safe, Michael. I'm waiting for you. When Michael returned to Arizona in February 1970, Frank took him to Betty's diner. They sat in the same booth where Frank used to write letters. They ordered more than soup. They got burgers and fries and milkshakes, paid for with some of the money that stranger had left. Grandpa told me what happened, Michael said to Betty, about the man who left the money. Do you know who it was? Betty hesitated. Then she said, it was someone who understood what your grandfather was doing for you. Someone who knew what it meant to serve and to sacrifice. That's all that matters. Michael nodded. I want to do something. I want to pay it forward. Can I leave money for the next veteran who comes in here? Betty smiled. Absolutely. Michael started a tradition that continues to this day at Betty's Diner, a veterans fund where people can leave money to pay for meals for veterans. The fund has paid for thousands of meals over the past 50 years. And it all started because Elvis saw an old man eating soup and writing letters and decided to help. The note that traveled the world. Years later, Frank's story became known in veteran communities. Michael shared his grandfather's story at VA meetings, at support groups, in letters to veteran organizations. The note Elvis wrote, "You matter, Frank. Your service mattered. Your grandson is lucky to have you," was photographed and shared online. It became a rallying cry for veteran support groups. Your service matters. You matter. That simple message, written on a piece of diner napkin by Elvis Presley in 1969, has been reprinted on posters in VA hospitals, in veteran newsletters, on social media pages dedicated to supporting servicemen and women. Someone Saw Me became the tagline for a national campaign to end veteran homelessness. The campaign used Frank's story, how one act of being seen, of being acknowledged, of being helped, changed not just his life, but his grandson's life too. Betty's Diner became a pilgrimage site for veterans. People would drive hours to eat there, to sit in Frank's booth, to contribute to the Veterans Fund. The diner's walls are now covered with photos of servicemen and women, letters from veterans thanking Frank and Elvis for starting something beautiful, and copies of that original note. Frank died in 1985 at age 84. His grandson Michael spoke at his funeral. My grandfather taught me that service doesn't end when you take off the uniform, that being a veteran means looking out for other veterans, that writing letters matters, that showing up matters, that being seen matters. He learned those lessons from a stranger in a diner who took the time to notice him. And now, thousands of veterans have learned those same lessons because of what that stranger started. The diner today, Betty's Diner, still stands on Route 66, though Betty herself passed away in 1998. Her daughter runs it now, and she's kept every tradition her mother started. The Veterans Fund has grown to over $50,000. Any veteran can eat free at Betty's Diner, any day, any time. The money Elvis left in 1969 has been multiplied thousands of times over by other donors inspired by the story. Frank Frank's booth has a small plaque, Frank's table, where letters were written, hope was given, and one stranger's kindness started a movement. The notebook Frank used to write letters to Michael is displayed in a glass case near the register. Visitors can read some of the letters, with Michael's permission, and see what those weekly letters meant. The care, the love, the determination to keep his grandson's spirits up, even when Frank himself was struggling. And next to the notebook is a framed copy of Elvis's note with an explanation. In May 1969, Elvis Presley stopped at this diner during a cross-country drive. He saw Frank, a veteran eating soup and writing letters to his grandson in Vietnam. Elvis quietly left money in this note. That act of kindness started a tradition that continues today. Over 50,000 meals have been served free to veterans because of what Elvis started. This is his legacy, seeing people who feel invisible and reminding them they matter. Thousands of visitors come each year. Many are veterans who leave their own stories, their own letters, their own contributions to the fund. The diner has become a shrine to the idea that small acts of noticing can create massive ripples. Do you know a veteran whose service has never been properly acknowledged? Someone who served quietly and came home to struggle in silence? Share their name in the comments. Let's make them feel seen, the way Elvis made Frank feel seen. The ripple effect continues. In 2019, 50 years after Elvis left that note, a documentary crew visited Betty's Diner to film a segment about the Veterans Fund. Michael, now 71 years old, was interviewed. "My grandfather never knew it was Elvis Presley who left that money," Michael said. "We found out years later, but Grandpa had already died by then. But you know what? It didn't matter who it was. What mattered was that someone saw him. Someone acknowledged his sacrifice. Someone reminded him that his service mattered and that what he was doing for me mattered. That's what kept him going. And that's what kept me going in Vietnam, knowing he was back home, writing those letters, believing in me." The documentary also featured dozens of other veterans who'd been helped by the fund over the years. A homeless vet who got his first hot meal in weeks at Betty's. A struggling single mother who was a Navy veteran and couldn't afford to feed her kids. The fund paid for their meals for 6 months until she got back on her feet. An Iraq War veteran dealing with PTSD who found community and support at Betty's, where other veterans gathered weekly. All of them said the same thing. Someone saw me. Someone cared. That made all the difference. When the documentary aired on Veterans Day 2019, donations to veterans organizations across the country spiked. Betty's Diner received so many donations to the Veterans Fund that they had to open a second fund to help veterans with housing and job training. And it all traced back to one night in 1969 when Elvis saw an old man eating soup and decided to help. What Frank never knew. Michael shared something at the end of the documentary that surprised many viewers. Grandpa kept that note with him until the day he died. It was in his wallet, folded carefully, read so many times the paper was falling apart. On particularly hard days, and Grandpa had a lot of hard days after Grandma died, he'd pull out that note and read it. "You matter, Frank. Your service mattered." He needed to hear that. We all need to hear that. Michael paused, emotional. "I wish Grandpa had known it was Elvis who wrote that note. I think it would have meant even more to him. But in another way, I'm glad he didn't know. Because the message mattered more than the messenger. Whether it was Elvis Presley or Joe the truck driver or anyone else, the fact that someone saw him, someone cared, someone took the time to help, that's what mattered. That's what made the difference." The documentary ended with Michael sitting in Frank's booth writing a letter, not to his grandfather, who was gone, but to other veterans. "I'm continuing what Grandpa started," Michael explained. "Writing letters to servicemen and women who are deployed, reminding them they matter, that someone back home cares. I learned from the best. Grandpa taught me that writing letters saves lives, and a stranger in a diner taught Grandpa that being seen saves lives. So I'm paying it forward, writing letters, seeing people, reminding them they matter." The full circle moment. In 2021, something remarkable happened at Betty's Diner. A young woman walked in wearing an army uniform. She'd just returned from a deployment in the Middle East. She sat in Frank's booth, ordered soup, and started writing in a notebook. The waitress, Betty's granddaughter, noticed and said, "Are you writing letters?" "Yeah," the young woman said. "To my grandfather. He's in a nursing home now. Dementia. He doesn't always remember who I am, but I write to him anyway. Tell him about my day, about what I'm doing, about how I'm staying safe. He used to write to me when I was deployed. Now I write to him." Betty's granddaughter felt tears forming. "Come with me. I want to show you something." She led the young woman to Frank's notebook in the glass case and told her the story. about Frank writing letters to Michael, about Elvis leaving money and a note, about how that act of kindness created a movement that was still going 50 years later. The young woman read Frank's letters and Elvis's note, crying the whole time. I never knew anyone else did this. I thought I was being silly, writing to someone who might not even remember me. You're not silly, Betty's granddaughter said. You're honoring a tradition that started right here in this diner. You're doing what Frank did, loving someone through letters. That matters. You matter. The young woman ate her soup, which the diner paid for, from the Veterans Fund, and continued writing her letter to her grandfather. When she finished, she left a donation to the fund with a note. For the next veteran who needs to be seen, someone who understands. That moment was photographed and shared online. It went viral, with millions of people seeing the continuation of what Elvis had started. The comment that was repeated most often: we all need someone to see us. We all need someone to remind us we matter. After hearing this story, are you going to thank a veteran today? Are you going to write a letter to someone who's serving? Are you going to see someone who feels invisible? Share in the comments what you're going to do, and let's create our own ripple effect. What this story teaches us, May 1969. A famous singer stopped at a roadside diner and saw an old veteran eating soup and writing letters. He could have ignored it. He could have finished his meal and left. Instead, he left $500 and a note reminding the veteran that he mattered. That act of noticing, that act of caring, that act of helping created ripples that are still spreading today. 50,000 years later, thousands of veterans have been helped because of what Elvis started. But here's the thing. Elvis didn't do anything extraordinary. He just noticed someone who felt invisible. He acknowledged their struggle. He helped in a practical way, and he reminded them they mattered. Any of us can do that. We don't need to be famous. We don't need to be rich. We just need to pay attention, to see the people everyone else overlooks, to acknowledge their struggles, to help in whatever way we can, to remind them they matter. How many Franks are in your life right now? People who are struggling quietly, eating their soup alone, writing their letters in corners where nobody sees them, people who need someone to notice, to care, to help. You don't need to leave $500. Sometimes it's just buying someone's coffee. Sometimes it's writing a letter. Sometimes it's just saying, I see you. Your struggle matters. You matter. Those words, you matter, are the most powerful words we can say to someone who feels invisible. They're the words that kept Frank going. They're the words that inspired a movement. They're the words that can change a life. Elvis understood that. He understood that the most important thing he could do with his fame and his money wasn't to perform on bigger stages or make more movies. It was to see people who felt unseen, to help people who were struggling, to remind people they mattered. That's his real legacy. Not the music, though the music is eternal. Not the movies, though they entertained millions. His real legacy is the thousands of lives he touched by noticing, by caring, by helping. And that legacy lives on every time someone eats a free meal at Betty's Diner. Every time a veteran reads those words, you matter, and finds strength to keep going. Every time someone writes a letter to a serviceman or woman and reminds them they're not alone. Elvis started something that will never end. Because kindness multiplies. One act inspires another. One person helped goes on to help others. One veteran seen goes on to see other veterans. That's the power of noticing. That's the ripple effect of caring. That's what happens when you treat invisible people like they matter. Because they do matter. Every single one of them. And so do you. Subscribe to Elvis Presley Legacy Stories to discover more moments that prove the smallest acts of noticing can create the biggest impacts. Share this story with a veteran you know. Let them know they're seen. Let them know they matter. And the next time you're in a diner or anywhere else, look around. See who's sitting alone. See who's struggling quietly. See who needs someone to notice them. Then, be their Elvis. Leave a note. Pay their bill. Remind them they matter. Because that's how we change the world. Not with grand gestures, with small acts of noticing, with simple words. You matter. Frank needed to hear it. His grandson needed him to hear it. Thousands of veterans since have needed to hear it. Who in your life needs to hear it today?